Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give it a second to give a chance for people to come in. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi and welcome. My name is Dr. Leila Cleary. I am an audiologist at Blue Moth Hearing. If you attended our first webinar, you already understand what tinnitus is and where it comes from. What most people realize pretty quickly, though, is that knowing what tinnitus is doesn't automatically make it easier to live with. So today is about moving from understanding to management. So specifically, we're going to talk about how tinnitus behaves in the brain and nervous system, why certain strategies reduce distress over time, and how consistency, not perfection, is what actually shifts tinnitus into the background of your life. My goal today is not to give you more things to try, but to help you understand why the things that work actually work, and so that you can use them with confidence instead of frustration. So, one of the biggest barriers to tinnitus improvement is unrealistic expectations. Many people start tinnitus care believing the goal is silence. Tinnitus management is a process of retraining, not fixing your auditory and emotional systems. When we aim for silence, the brain stays hypervigilant. Is it gone yet? Is it quieter now? But when we aim for neutrality, habituation can occur. Tinnitus management is not about fixing a broken ear. It's about retraining the auditory system and the emotional centers of the brain. Progress rarely looks like steady improvement. Instead, it comes in waves. So you have better days, worse days, and eventually more neutral days. So when we shift the goal from silence to reduce distress, we remove pressure from the nervous system, and that's when real changes start to happen. I just want to make sure real quick that I don't have people in the waiting room. Okay. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure we were good. Okay, so the management framework. Tinnitus itself is just a sound, but suffering comes from what the brain does with that sound. The brain pays attention to things that stand out, feel threatening, or are constantly monitored. So when tinnitus blends with other sounds, feels safe rather than dangerous, or stops being checked repeatedly, the brain naturally deprioritizes it. That's why two people with the same tinnitus loudness can have completely different experiences. So, every effective tinnitus strategy, whether it's sound therapy, counseling, or stress management, works by addressing one of these three factors or more than one. So now that we have the framework established, let's talk about the pillars for a successful tinnitus management model. So the first is auditory input or sound. Sound is the foundation. Tinnitus thrives in silence. So our goal is to give the brain healthy, consistent auditory input. This can include hearing aids, sound therapy, environmental sound, or intentional listening strategies. We're not trying to cover up tinnitus. We're teaching the brain that tinnitus is not the most important sound in the room. Next is nervous system regulation. Tinnitus is closely tied to how safe or threatened the nervous system feels. So when the body is stuck in a heightened stress state, tinnitus tends to feel louder, sharper, and more intrusive. So, by regulating the nervous system through breathing, movement, sleep optimization, and stress response training, we lower the brain's alarm level so tinnitus loses its emotional charge. And last is cognitive and attentional retraining. What we pay attention to grows. So, this pillar focuses on changing how the brain responds to tinnitus rather than fighting it. So, through guided attention strategies and cognitive reframing, we teach the brain to stop monitoring tinnitus as a threat. Over time, the tinnitus moves from the foreground of awareness to the background where it belongs. So think of tinnitus management as a three-legged stool. If one leg is missing, the system becomes unstable. Sound alone can help, but without nervous system regulation, stress keeps the tinnitus loud. Cognitive strategies help, but without sound, the tinnitus still stands out. So, when all three of these pillars are working together, the brain receives a consistent message. This sound is not important and not dangerous. So, if you've tried tinnitus strategies before and felt stuck, it's often because one of these pillars wasn't adequately supported. So, let's go into sound therapy. A common misconception is that sound therapy should cover up tinnitus. Masking, which is the covering up of the tinnitus, can provide temporary relief, but it keeps the brain in a battle, pushing tinnitus away rather than learning it's safe. So, I often like to use the comparison of a band aid. A band aid helps to cover a wound, but if you take that band aid off, the wound is still there. So, masking acts very much like a band aid, where it covers up that tinnitus, but the second you remove that band aid, the tinnitus is right there again. So, blended sound works differently. The goal is to reduce contrast between tinnitus and silence, allowing tinnitus to coexist with other sounds. So, over time, the brain stops flagging tinnitus as important because it's no longer standing alone. Habituation happens when the auditory system receives stable, non threatening input consistently. So, sound therapy is one of the most effective tinnitus treatment options because it reduces the contrast between silence and the internal ringing. When the brain consistently receives external sound, it stops feeling the need to amplify internal noise. So, this change allows the auditory system to relax and supports a long term habituation. This this change actually views the tinnitus as a neutral background signal rather than something that's threatening. So people then often report a softer, calmer, and less intrusive tinnitus after giving their brain this time to adapt. More so, an even greater benefit of sound therapy is that through normalizing the noise, you also normalize your body's response to it. So, given the abundance of noise in our everyday lives, sound therapy offers tools to process a range of stimuli in a healthy, centering way. So, much like meditative practices or processes, the process gives us the skills of finding peace amid the noise. So, lastly, this shift in perspective accomplishes a third important benefit: lowering stress and reducing the negative emotions associated with tinnitus results in less frequent and severe occurrences of tinnitus. So, some of the ways that this can be done is includes wearing hearing aids, using masking noise, fractal tones, or combining sound therapies with counseling sessions. So, finding the right sound for sound therapy is usually a trial and error process. Some sounds work better than others for managing tinnitus, and what works for one individual might not necessarily work for another. So, examples of sound therapy include broadband sounds. These provide wide frequency stimulation and are usually pretty foundational for many patients. So, these include white noise, brown noise, pink noise, and that they tend to be a very common to use with sound generators or sound machines. Nature and environmental sounds, these are broadband sounds with natural variations. So these include ocean waves and rainfall, waterfall, wind. They are predictable enough to soothe, but variable enough to avoid drawing attention. Next, we have music-based sounds. These engage both the emotional and auditory brain centers. These include standard music, customized music therapy, or music combined with noise. Next, we have fractal tones. So fractal tones are a chain of tones generated by an algorithm in WideX hearing aids. So fractal tones are different in that they are self-similar tones, but they have a recursive algorithm. So you can never predict what is coming next. They sound familiar, but they follow an appropriate tempo and pitch for relaxation. We then have notched sound therapy. So notched sound therapy can be used with certain types of hearing aid amplification and with filtered music. So the idea behind notched sound therapy is that we filter out the specific pitch that the tinnitus is at. So the brain is not being stimulated at that pitch or frequency, while all the other surrounding pitches or frequencies of the tinnitus in a hearing aid or in filtered music are being filtered out. So the tinnitus pitch is being actually filtered out of that music. So this approach may inhibit neural activity related to the tinnitus. So we intentionally leave out that tinnitus pitch. So we're not feeding that part of the brain that's already too active. Instead, we stimulate the surrounding sound areas so the brain can rebalance itself. We have hearing aid-based sound therapy. This is using hearing aids to amplify your environment in general. So you're going to be hearing sounds that you normally weren't hearing without the hearing aids, which helps with the tinnitus. And then we also can be used as built-in sound generators. So most hearing aids have the ability to create some type of sound therapy within the hearing aids. And sometimes you can have both of those things then actually working together, both as amplification and as sound generators. Another example of sound therapy is low-level background sound. So we just have in our everyday environment. So like fans or the refrigerator running or soft television, a humidifier or distant music. Those sounds in our environment kind of help to be able to cover some of that tinnitus so it's not such a stark silence. And lastly is guided sound plus relaxation. So this combines nervous sound with nervous system regulation. So you're going to take both of those things combined together. So examples of this is sound plus breathing exercises, sound plus mindfulness exercises, sound plus movement exercises. So you're taking both that sound and an element of relaxation together. So choosing the right sound. There is no one best sound. We choose sounds based on tinnitus type, so whether your tinnitus is tonal or broadband, hearing status, emotional reactivity, environment, so when are you experiencing it, day versus night, and patient preference. So the best sound is one that is comfortable, neutral, and sustainable. Sound should blend with tinnitus, not overpower it. So the sound should be comfortable. It should feel easy on your system. If a sound is too loud or too sharp or emotionally charged, or if it requires effort to tolerate, the nervous system stays activated and the tinnitus remains on high alert. A comfortable sound tells the brain that nothing is wrong here. That sense of safety is essential for tinnitus to fade into the background. The sound should never feel irritating or intrusive or effortful. If the nervous system perceives that the sound is annoying or even slightly annoying, it can increase vigilance and make the tinnitus feel even worse. So comfort tells the brain this is safe. And that safety is what allows the tinnitus to fade into the background. Second is neutral. Neutral does not mean boring. It means non-attention grabbing. So highly pleasant or emotional sounds like your favorite music or meaningful sounds, they tend to pull your focus and create expectations, and they encourage active listening. So for tinnitus therapy, we want sound that the brain can actually ignore naturally. So neutral sounds allows the tinnitus to lose importance without replacing it with something else that demands attention. So while pleasant sounds can be helpful early on in your tinnitus journey, Neutral sounds are better for long-term use. Highly emotional or engaging sounds like your favorite music can draw your attention, create expectation, and it can even lead to frustration once you turn it off. So, neutral sounds are predictable and boring, but in the best way. We want the brain to stop monitoring them. So, when we stop monitoring the music or the sound, it'll stop monitoring the tinnitus as well. And lastly, is sustainable. The sound must be something that can be used for long periods of time, every day, and without fatigue or annoyance. So if you love a sound for 10 minutes but hate it after 30, it won't help. Consistency matters far more than complexity or novelty. Habituation happens through repeated low effort exposure, not through intensity and variety. The best sound is the one that you can actually use consistently. So if the sound requires constant adjustment, special equipment, or feels exhausting after 20 minutes, it won't support long-term habituation. Sustainable sound can run quietly in the background while daily life without during your daily life without it actually demanding your attention. So you want it just to be playing back there, but not actually drawing your attention. So obviously it's going to change versus daytime and nighttime. So anytime that you're concentrating, working, reading, driving, doing household tasks, your brain is already working hard. So these moments are ideal for sound therapy because sound helps to reduce the contrast between the tinnitus and silence. It prevents the brain from locking into the tinnitus, and it supports sustained attention without distraction. So think of the sound as a background stabilizer, not the main event. So it should be there, but it should not demand your attention. So transitions are high risk moments for tinnitus awareness. So these examples of these are waking up, moving between tasks, getting into the car, quiet moments before a meeting, end of the workday. During these moments, the brain naturally scans for input, and the tinnitus often fills in that gap. So adding a gentle sound before and during transitions helps keep the tinnitus from grabbing the center stage. The goal isn't to eliminate the tinnitus, we just don't want to give it the microphone. So you're going to want to set that sound slightly below your tinnitus. Sound should sit just right below where your level of your tinnitus is at to be loud enough to reduce the contrast. It's going to be quiet enough that the tinnitus is still present, and it's going to allow the brain to be able to hear both the tinnitus and the sound without labeling the tinnitus as a threat. So it's going to support habituation rather than mask it. This teaches the brain that tinnitus doesn't need to be monitored or feared. Fully covering it, like masking, can reinforce that dependence on sound. And lastly, you're going to wean gradually. You don't want to stop abruptly. So sound therapy is a training tool, not a lifelong crutch. So as the tinnitus becomes less intrusive, you're going to lower the volume slowly, you're going to shorten listening periods, and you're going to allow brief quiet moments. So abruptly stopping sound can cause tinnitus to rebound. Gradual weaning allows the brain to maintain calm without needing constant sound input. So, why does tinnitus feel louder at night? So, nighttime's tinnitus isn't stronger. It's just more noticeable and a more emotionally charged. So, during the quiet hours, the brain receives far less auditory stimulation. So, with fewer competing sounds, the tinnitus is more noticeable, like the spotlight in an empty room. The nervous system is still alert. It's still scanning for danger even when you're winding down. So without distractions, the tinnitus can trigger the brain's threat detector, making it feel louder or more urgent. And over time, your brain starts to link bedtime and silence with noticing tinnitus. So this is a learned association, can make it feel automatically louder at night, even if the actual sound hasn't changed at all. So now that we've talked about the importance of auditory input, it is essential that we discuss hearing aids' role in that. So hearing loss creates these silent spots in certain frequency and pitch ranges. So when the brain receives less input at these frequencies, it can amplify the neural activity to compensate, which contributes to the tinnitus perception. Hearing aids restore these missing sounds, providing the brain with accurate auditory information. So the result is that the tinnitus signal is no longer the loudest or most salient sound, reducing its prominence. Also, with reducing central gain. So, what is central gain? Central gain is the brain's adaptive response to reduce auditory input. So, it increases the sensitivity of the neurons in that auditory pathway from the ear to the brain. This heightened sensitivity can make the tinnitus louder and more intrusive. So, by delivering consistent sound through hearing aids, the brain's need to amplify internal sounds decrease. So, over time, this helps to normalize that auditory processing and reduces the perceived intensity of the tinnitus. It encourages natural habituation. So, habituation is that brain's ability to tune out irrelevant sounds, including tinnitus. So, hearing aids don't mask or eliminate the tinnitus. They create an auditory environment where the brain can safely ignore the tinnitus. So, combined with attention and cognitive strategies, hearing aids facilitate long term retraining of the auditory system, allowing that tinnitus to recede into the background. So we've talked about auditory input, sound, in the management of tinnitus. Now let's move on to that nervous system regulation. So tinnitus activates the same brain network as fear and vigilance. When stress is high, the auditory system becomes more sensitive. This is physiology. It is not weakness. So, stress activates the same brain circuits involved in tinnitus distress. This is why tinnitus often flares during emotionally difficult periods. Importantly, this isn't a sign that the tinnitus is worsening, it is a sign that the nervous system is under strain. So, it activates the limbic system. The stress triggers the brain's emotional center, which is that limbic system. This system interprets tinnitus as a potential threat, increasing cognitive distress and focus on the sound. The result then is that the tinnitus feels sharper, more intrusive, and harder to ignore. Heightens the auditory gain. So, stress ramps up the nervous system, increasing that central gain that we talked about earlier in the auditory pathways. So, the brain effectively turns up the volume on the internal signals, including tinnitus. Even if the tinnitus sound itself hasn't changed, it's still perceived as louder. And it reinforces the threat loop. So, as we know, stress plus loud feeling tinnitus equals more anxiety and more stress. So, this positive feedback loop keeps the brain focused on tinnitus and amplifies distress over time. So, breaking this loop is key to long term tinnitus management. So now let's turn our focus on nervous system regulation. The fastest way to calm tinnitus is through the body, not the ears. This isn't about quick fixes. It's about retraining the system through repetition. The parasympathetic nervous system, PNS, is the branch responsible for rest, repair, and recovery. So when we activate the PNS, we reduce the stress response, which lowers the central gain in the auditory system, and then it dampens the brain's threat response to tinnitus. Breathing techniques help to emphasize whenever you use a longer exhale than inhale, it naturally stimulates the PNS. So, for example, if you inhale for 4 seconds, you're going to exhale for 6 to 8 seconds. This pattern signals to the brain all is safe, helping to reduce the tinnitus loudness perception indirectly. And then repetition retrains the brain, the baseline. So regular practice of the slow parasympathetic focused breathing resets the nervous system's default state. And so over time, the brain becomes less reactive to the tinnitus, making the sounds feel less urgent or threatening. So this retraining is cumulative. Consistency is more important than the intensity of it. Tinnitus isn't just about sound, it's about how your nervous system reacts to it. So by practicing slow, controlled breathing, calming exercises regularly, you're training your brain and your body to relax. So over time, the tinnitus is going to feel less loud and bothersome because your brain isn't stuck in this threat mode. On to our last element in our management model is cognitive load and attention. The more we check tinnitus, the more the brain flags it as important. Instead of forcing attention away, we practice gentle redirection, allowing the tinnitus to exist without engagement. So the brain naturally prioritizes what we focus on. When we give attention to tinnitus, the sound seems more prominent and intrusive, even if the intensity hasn't actually changed. Constantly checking or listening for tinnitus strengthens the brain's threat association with the sound. So this keeps that tinnitus loop active, making it harder to ignore over time. And cognitive retraining is not about forcing yourself to ignore the tinnitus. It's about subtly redirecting attention to neutral and meaningful stimuli. So gradual, consistent redirection reduces the brain's focus on tinnitus without creating additional stress. So habituation happens when the brain decides the tinnitus is safe to ignore. This can't be forced, but it can be supported. So habituation isn't about pretending that it's not there. The sound may still be present, but the brain stops reacting to it as a threat. Patients often try to fight or block tinnitus. Suppression is going to increase stress, reinforce the brain's alarm response, and making the tinnitus feel louder. So you're not going to want to try to suppress the awareness. Habituation occurs when the nervous system repeatedly experiences tinnitus without danger or negative consequence. So over time, the brain is going to naturally tune the sound out, making it less intrusive and more emotionally neutral. So you might ask, why does progress plateau? So there's a couple of reasons why. First being inconsistent strategies, skipping sound therapy, relaxation strategies, attention retraining reduces the effectiveness. Habituation and nervous system regulation require consistent, repeated practice over time. If you're frequently checking with clinicians or apps or forums or websites, is this normal? That reinforces the threat loop. So this keeps the brain focused on the tinnitus, slowing habituation and slowing that progress. And tinnitus relief is rarely ever a straight line. Progress usually comes in small gains with occasional setbacks, which is normal, and that doesn't mean that the strategies aren't working. So plateaus are normal. They don't mean failure. They mean that the brain is recalibrating. Plateaus are part of the process. The brain often consolidates changes before improvement becomes obvious. So here at Blue Moth, we support the pillars of management model through education. We believe that patients need to understand what tinnitus is in order to manage it effectively. So education helps to reduce fear, misconceptions, and it empowers patients to take control. Every tinnitus case is unique. We provide personalized programs combining sound therapy with nervous system regulation, attention retraining, and lifestyle strategies. One option is Auto. It is our cognitive behavioral therapy. This program has structured CBT techniques specifically designed for tinnitus. It helps to reframe reactions, reduce distress, retrain attention, and it complements many sound and hearing-based interventions. Another option that we offer is hearing aid support. So detailed tinnitus and hearing testing and programming hearing aids to support the tinnitus management. This ensures that sound therapy and amplification work together seamlessly. And then lastly, we offer long-term follow-up. We provide ongoing monitoring and tracking to support progress, to adjust plans, reinforce skills, and ensuring lasting relief and functional improvement with your tinnitus. So thank you so much for joining me today. Just a reminder, you are in control and support is available. Remember, you are not powerless over your tinnitus. With the right strategies and consistent support, the sound can become less intrusive, less stressful, and easier to live with. You don't have to do it alone. Blue Moth is here to guide you with evidence-based tools, individualized plans, and ongoing support every step of the way. If you would like a complimentary consultation to discuss your tinnitus journey and a personalized strategy, please feel free to reach out to us at 855-496-2766. You will also receive an email after this webinar with our booking link. Please know that we're currently offering 10% off our cognitive behavioral program, Auto. To those who attended this webinar, you will also be sent that promotion code in the email that you will receive. We are also currently offering a holiday promotion of $1,000 off of a pair of premium hearing aids. We are here to educate and give you the tools that you need to help your brain calm the noise. So once again, thank you for joining me, and please join me next time. The week of January 5th, we are going to be talking about Hearing Loss 101, Understanding the Invisible Condition. So please be on the lookout for the invitation to join me then. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Happy holidays.